done over the week. I was able to go to Kentucky this weekend, Larry,
I
for
saw that.
outdoor target national or outdoor target S3DA 3D nationals out in London, Kentucky. And we had a real good weekend. Pennsylvania S3DA came home with all around a couple of champions, a bunch of top five, pretty much just stellar performances across sport. My son, well, it used to be called middle school, but now in S3DA it's called just the youth class. He shot up 12 on Friday, and then Saturday when he shot his second round, he came out of the gates on fire. First target, boom, 12, a lower 12. Second target, missed the 12, literally by a half inch, quarter inch. And then 10 more targets, he missed every 12 by less than a half inch to an inch. And he was like beside himself. And I said, son, some days you're the bug, some days you're the windshield. So you just gotta keep trying. You just gotta keep trying. And he did, and still ended up for the day. But I think he was definitely hoping for more. I said, hey, that's the archery you were this weekend. Now you know where do you need to improve for next year. He still has one more year in that class, so he's still on the younger side for that age group. But anyways, well, welcome back to the Archery CoachCast, everyone. And as you guys can see that are viewing us on Facebook right now, we are streaming live. We are recording these podcasts live. Sure, the edited version might be a little bit different, but you get the firsthand notion. This episode is the first of our live streams, so we're happy that you guys are joining us for that. And I just want to double check. I think we're on episode 14 right now. Does that sound about right, Doc? Just looked it up. I went to write it down, and I didn't.
I think it probably is.
Yeah, I think we're. I'm looking at it. Let me double check this. Yes, episode 14. The last one, episode 13, was where Doc and I got to talk about his teaching an old dog new tricks and him taking on bear bow. But this episode's different. So this episode, we have a PA native and friend, Justin Contra. Justin, thanks for joining us.
Hi, thank you.
Just give a real quick, before we kind of dive into the meat and potatoes of this episode, give us like who you are, what kind of archery you shoot, and what you do, for a living.
Sure. Yeah, so thank you for having me. I appreciate it. And, I look forward to the conversation today about archery and everything else. So a little bit about myself. So from a profession, right? By education, I'm a chemist. So I studied organic chemistry for quite a few years, both in and out of state. So that was fun and challenging, and I think bleeds a little bit over into some of the archery and the outdoors. With that background in chemistry, I've worked in applied material sciences for the last decade or so. I spent 5 to 7 years in biomedical material research and development. So looking at different types of materials for implants inside and then also just outside the body. So that was a lot of fun. And since then, I've transferred into lubricant additives. So a kind of parallel field that's still dealing a lot with chemistry and polymers and how we can use them in our everyday life. But yeah, now it's not so much focused on medical materials, but much more in the automotive and the industrial space. So looking at materials there.
Cool.
On the personal side, yeah, we'll I'm sure dive into all of this in a bit of depth, but being an outdoorsman is the huge part of who I am. So pretty much any time of the year you can find me outside, whether that is keeping my archery in tip-top shape, which is something that I do frequently, mostly a longbow trad shooter now, although I did kind of work from at first with a compound and sort of transitioned into the traditional game. But in addition to archery, I'm an avid fly fisherman. And so I'm into that as much as I can. And again, that's a year-round passion and pursuit. But really everything from training the new bird dog that I got to chasing anything with fur or feathers. Yeah, you can almost always find me outdoors.
It's crazy. The fly fishing trad archery thing definitely goes hand in hand. There's no question.
It sure does. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
I think they both, if you're just talking about something that requires a feel and a feeling and an immersive experience, yeah, fly fishing and traditional archery, you find a lot of crossover. You hang out in a lot of fly shops, you also find quite a few traditional archers there too.
Yeah, I'm sure I would think you've heard of him, maybe not. My good friend John Demmer is a serious fly fisherman, and
Mhm.
he's one of the top barebow shooters in the world. And I've recorded podcasts with him on the barebow project where he's tying flies while we're podcasting. Like that's just
Yep.
that's where his brain goes. But anyway, so Doc, you know Justin better than the rest of us for sure. You want to kind of preface the conversation, and let everybody know like where your focus, where your brain is with this one?
Okay, well, I've been on twice now in the last few weeks, beginning to introduce subject that's very dear to me that I introduced through my organization, Gray Fox Archery Association, almost 10 years ago. And that's my Archery for Life program. And that came out of a great deal of research that was mainly done in the neurosciences, but other related sciences, because most people who shoot bows, I found, as once I took the bow up again, and we won't go into this much, but I'd been an archer since I was a young child, probably 7 or so. And then I had a stroke just about 12 years ago. I'd been out of archery briefly for a while because I'm very, very busy with my professional life and private practice and psychoanalysis using a theory that is about the natural system and applying that to health and wellness for human beings, emotional as well as physical. And so when I had my stroke, I got back into into archery because I needed to do something that would create focus and a lot of exercise to get my strength back. Hi, Sean. And so in doing that, I started to realize a lot of other people were saying that the same thing I was feeling, that when they shoot, not necessarily traditionally, but when they shoot their bow and regularly, it makes them feel good. And that's what I've pursued as a research question for now 12 years. And during that time, I met a lot of interesting people, and Justin's one of those very interesting people that I get to meet in archery. And I know him to be at the early stages of a real strong commitment to Archery for Life. And when I say Archery for Life, I'm not just talking about one's tenure here on the planet, but I'm talking about life in terms of a fullness of life, enjoyment of life, and actual. We have the term in our language, which isn't in many other languages, well-being. And that they flip it, and it means being well, but it means to be in good relationship with what's inside of you and what's outside of you, and that's all the aspects of the natural system. The bow and arrow put us into that, and that goes back many generations. And here, as we have with all of us up on the top line here, someone in our families probably introduced us to archery in some fashion, and that got passed on to us. Archery has been passed down for hundreds of thousands of generations on this planet. It is now known exactly how long the bow has been on the planet, and the answer is no one knows, because it's really been here time immemorial. And we can see that the human brain and the capacity to do those various motions that we do, and the development of the bow and archery really developed in sync with each other. Justin mentioned fly fishing. A lot of the enjoyment of fly fishing is the actual motion of casting and so forth, and then the thrill of seeing a trout coming up from a falling fly onto the water is exciting. But I asked Justin to join us because he is now another generation of enthusiastic archers who will continue to pass this on to other people. And I just wanted him to tell us a little bit about how he got into this, why it's important to him, and why he would see it as something to pass on to others. And so like he says, when he isn't trout fishing, he's shooting his bow and hunting. He's been very successful in the hunts. And also when he isn't shooting his bow or trout fishing, he does work some. But it seems to me, I wouldn't want to say this internationally on something where he could get caught, but it seems to me that he has a heck of a job that can allow him to do all this stuff. I've always worked for myself. My boss is a real pain in the butt, so I don't get that much time off. But tell us about your grandfather, how you got into this.
Sure, sure. So, as Doc said, my connection to the outdoors is definitely linked to the relationship with my maternal grandfather. So I had the privilege of growing up. I was just down the street from him, a quarter mile or so. And so from, the time that I was really, really little, I mean, I think I was still in diapers. My grandfather was taking me basically all over with him, all over the country, all over the outdoors. And when I was young, he was still working professionally. His title at Woodstream, I believe he was a wildlife engineer, right? And what that meant for him was he was intricately involved in the design and development of animal traps. And not just limited to, like the heyday of the fur boom in the 1970s and 80s, right, with foothold traps and body style traps, conibear traps. He did all of that, and he was a pioneer in terms of design and implementation of animal traps and their ethical use. But he also transitioned then, as the fur boom went away, into developing, residential, and he always called them hairy homeowner traps. So things to catch, cage traps for those groundhogs and skunks in your backyard, professional wildlife traps for nuisance animals. So those would be like glue boards, as Doc had mentioned, the little mouse traps that everybody thinks of with the square block of trees for the trigger, right? All those types of animal traps he worked on over his extensive 35 to 40-year career in Woodstream in Lidditz, Pennsylvania. And what was great about that, and me being sort of tangential to his profession and to his work, was he was constantly traveling the country educating folks, whether it would be state wildlife agencies on how to manage, predators or nuisance invasives or that type of thing. Or it was actually, hey, I've got some new traps and we have to go try them out, right? And you had to travel to different regions, to have that access and that ability to try out those new designs and new traps, right? And so I was fortunate at a young age. I went to many trapping conventions, and I got to meet some of the legendary old timers that had been in the game for a really, really long time. And it was there I got to be a part of, the conversations my grandfather would have with his friends and colleagues, but then experience different parts of the country, different types of animals and wilderness, and all those types of outdoor. Again, they were experiences that you could only have if you knew someone like my grandfather that had such a connection to the outdoors. And so really it was all about, from I was very young, getting outside, trapping, hunting, and then we always fished too. So you joked, what kind of job do I have that I get to fish all the time? My grandfather had the best job because his job was actually working with wildlife and trapping. And then when he wasn't doing that, he got to fish. So for him, it really was almost all day, every day, he was able to pursue those different passions. And I was lucky enough to tag along for a good chunk of it.
What got you into archery?
Sure. So again, being such an outdoorsman, right? I spent every fall in the woods, and whether it was, hunting small game or deer with rifles, shotguns, muzzleloaders, flintlocks, I was always out and about, right? And when October and November would roll around, I would always see these bucks, right? And they'd be chasing does and making scrapes and doing rubs and all that kind of thing. And I never wanted to wait until rifle season to go after them. That was my thing, right? Because man, they were out here. I was seeing them. I knew where they were moving, but you couldn't hunt with a rifle until December, and the flintlock was even later than that in January. So kind of late in high school and then early into college, I decided, archery would be a great way to get me a few extra weeks to chase those bucks that were out running around in October and November. And that's really what got me into it. Archery was sort of a means or a tool to get after those deer that I had been seeing when I was out squirrel hunting and grouse hunting and that type of thing. And that was kind of why I was really interested in it. It wasn't just about archery and then hunting bled into it. It was all about hunting, and then archery was sort of the means to get me out there. So I went to Lancaster Archery. That was sort of I was fortunate growing up in Lidditz. I was real close, right? So it was an easy drive. And I walked in and I kind of told the folks what I was looking for and what I wanted to do. And I walked out with a Hoyt compound all set up. And 6 months later, I was I got my first deer with that compound. So
That's impressive. There seems to be a definite. How many years have you been hunting now, Justin?
well, oh geez. I mean, I was tagging along before I could even get a hunting license. So,
Right.
probably, 20 plus years, 25 years. Yeah.
But so many rifle hunters, or you grew up in a household of rifle hunters, and then you see these deer, you're driving early fall, in the
Hmm.
middle of fall, you're seeing deer run around all over the place. I'm like, well, I want to go hunt then, because tradition is what there's a great YouTube video out there where they compare like people who grew up in an archery hunting household and people who grew up in like the right deer camp household, where
Yeah.
you
Yep.
go away for the weekend or the long weekend when Mondays were the start of rifle
Hmm.
season, and you'd go for that week, and they're cutting shirt tails off of people, and here you come from that sort of, and then it's the first step is compound, and then that transfers to, I think Doc said earlier, a Samick, and then that
Yep.
Samick has turned into a Ferguson bow, which we'll get to, and I don't want to steal anybody's thunder, but that's Doc's longtime friend, and
Sure.
I've been blessed to become a friend of Byron Ferguson through Doc's relationship with him. And just like there's like when you talk about the lifelong stuff, like that's a transformation.
Hmm.
That's like the evolution of a bow hunter. You come in as a rifle hunter, compound, first trad bow, and then it's just this big long, you keep diving deeper, and we get further and further away from modern bow hunting the longer it seems we get into bow hunting. I did the exact same thing.
Sure, sure, sure. I think too, I came from a unique outdoor experience as well, because I definitely had, since I was a kid, that weekend deer camp that you were talking about. I've lost a shirt tail or two in my younger days, especially. So yeah, I definitely came from that. And everybody knows the opening day of rifle season in Pennsylvania, it's almost like a holiday, right? Tons of gunshots, deer running around everywhere. It's exciting. You see a lot of animals, and that is great. But I think for me, transitioning to archery was a little bit probably easier than for most folks. Not the mechanics of shooting the bow that fought me claw, tooth, and nail, right? I think it does for a lot of folks. I'd say it still does, but for me, because I spent a lot of my youth, trapping And, I think if you're a really good trapper, so if you know how to get an animal to step in a 2-foot circle, right? And even more than that, if you know how to get them to step in maybe a 2-inch circle, you have to know a lot about how animals move, where they like to be, where they don't like to be. You have to be cognizant of yourself. So the scent you're leaving behind. I mean, there are a lot of different factors into being a really good trapper, right? And they all come down to understanding animals, animal movement, and just the general overall set of woodsmanship skills, right? That you really have to have. So my transition to archery was probably easier than most folks because for years I had always been thinking about, where are animals going to be? And I got to get really, really close to them, right? And I don't want them to know I'm here. A lot of rifle hunters don't have that mentality. I mean, in when I was growing up deer hunting, we had these tree houses that had wood stoves in them, and you just sat there and you had the fire burning, and you had deer running around. So that's very, very different than, okay, I want to get within 10 yards of a 3.5-year-old buck, right? That's hard. And it takes a very different skill set. And so for me, like I said, the transition was easier than I think for most folks in terms of finding success and getting close to deer. So that wasn't necessarily the hard part for me. But it was really understanding, the mechanics of the bow, the equipment, the selection, and then of course, executing that shot, right? Those were the challenging things.
Sure.
And, you talked about the progression of a bow hunter. For me, it's funny, what you said was exactly true. So I hunted with a compound for, it was about 5 years, I think. And every year I was fortunate. I put in the time, of course, put in the practice, but I was always able to fill the tags that I wanted to. So I was very fortunate there. And then around year 5 or so, I started, I got that, less expensive Samick bow. I wasn't real confident, right? I thought, well, I'm going to get it and I'm going to start shooting in the backyard, right? That was really just it. And, slowly, right, you get more confidence. I had transitioned from that to a longbow as well. So I was, was doing a lot of shooting with that. Fell in love with it mostly because I shot it really well, and by accident the arrows were tuned, I think is what really happened. So I went from not shooting so well with a different bow because I don't think I had the right arrows, and then by chance this longbow, it just like dropped out of the sky, and man, I could shoot that thing. I had a couple gap years where, when the rut was really on and I knew I was going to be on deer, I was still taking that compound out because I just wasn't 100% confident in that longbow yet. But then really now the past 3 years, it's been, overwhelmingly 90+% has really been sticking with the longbow and traditional archery. So yeah, everything you said, from kind of starting with the deer camp mentality and one, what I would say style and culture of hunting, to then getting into archery and sort of transitioning through the different phases that a lot of hunters have. I'd say I'm very typical in that sense.
Hey, you said about rifle hunters hunting in like little mini cabins with heaters. That's the way Larry hunts archery, just so you know. So,
oh yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. Maybe this year. I heard he's building a tower or two. He's looking for that mute button. Yeah.
Yeah. They're pulling the knife out of my back.
Oh, Larry, we're just playing with you. You've been too quiet, so. But you might, I don't know. I bet you, like, I'll probably go back to compound at some point. Like, if I can't pull a traditional bow, I may go back to compound. I still enjoy shooting a compound, to be honest. Like, especially
sure.
3D. I enjoy a compound at 3D, but I'll take a bare bow rig or a trad rig for hunting and competition target any day. I just enjoy it more.
Yeah, it's something too, right? I don't think they're mutually exclusive, or at least they're not for me. It seems like some guys it can be, and we can draw another parallel to fishing, right? Because again, I fish all the time. So, you have a lot of guys, for me, shooting a compound bow is a little bit more formulaic. It's a little bit more mechanical. It's just really how I compartmentalize it. And to me, that's a lot like gear fishing, conventional fishing, right? with bait casters and spinning rods, and that's great. And occasionally I love to do that. I still get out. But when you shoot a longbow, to me, that's a lot like fly fishing, right? Yes, there are a lot of mechanics that you have to have down. And for some folks, shooting a bare bow is just as technical and mechanical as shooting a compound. For me, it was all about feel, right? And so it was just really through a lot of trial and error and a lot of shooting and repetition and really understanding what it should feel like and having that positive feedback loop of a good shot or a good cast, right? If you're thinking in terms of fly fishing, that for me is what really drove me to traditional archery. And of course, right, there is an added challenge, especially when you throw the hunting component into it, because I was always a guy with my trad bow. I practiced out to 30 or 40 yards, but shots on animals were always 15 or under. That was kind of my limit, right? And when you're talking about the difference between being able to make, say, a 40-yard shot, which is the comfort zone for a lot of guys with compound tackle, right? And making a 15-yard shot, you draw that circle around your tree stand. That is a whole different level of intimacy with that animal, right? To be able to make those shots. So for me, there's definitely, it's about that feel. It's something about watching the trajectory of that arrow, those big white fletchings as they fly into the target. I love that. But there's also an added level of challenge to it, right? And you got to shoot a lot. A big part of it is shooting so much that you're really confident, right? You can pull it off, and then being able to execute.
Doc,
for sure.
Will you maybe unravel the relationship here? This is the Archery CoachCast, and normally, not all the time, with exception to a few of the episodes, we're talking anything from shooting form for compound to recurve to some bare bow stuff. But here we are, we're having a podcast that so far the conversation has been primarily hunting. And that might surprise a few people, because I know a lot of people follow us, and there's a lot of viewers right now on Facebook that are, I know they're avid hunters and target shooters. Can you unravel the relationship a little bit, Doc, and why this conversation is happening for them?
For me, why it's happening is the transgenerational passing forward, perhaps within families. That's traditionally, I think, how it's happened, to develop an enthusiasm for, in this case, hunting or being outdoors and becoming familiar with it and becoming comfortable in the outdoors, which is part of our, I think, a real need that we have of, especially in modern times when a lot of our relationship with our surroundings is done this way. And I'm not knocking that. I mean, I'm sitting in front of one right now, in front of them for 15 or 20 years now. But the more we can have a connection with an activity, in this case archery, or possibly fly fishing, but this is an archery program, so we're talking archery. But archery is about movement, and it's a relationship within ourselves to the outside, and the outside in here, and the bow and arrow have become a means for that connection to take place. And I've done a lot of research, as many of you know, in the last 10 or 15 years now. People will say, well, when I shoot my bow, I come home from the office and I go out and shoot for a while, or I come over to, in this case, because I'm close to Lancaster Archery too, I go over to the range, shoot a few arrows. It makes me feel good. It allows me to relax and so forth. And I started to explore that. And this is about that. It's about making that connection with that good feeling, because when we have that good feeling, we are in a proper relationship with our environment, inside and out. And I work in the medical field. I taught 41 years in the medical field about this connection with the entire system. So this program is about that and how it gets passed from generation to generation. in this case, from a grandfather to a grandson. In your case, Frank, from your father to you.
Yeah.
Same for Larry. Same for myself. But when I told my father I was going to hunt with a bow, I mean, he looked at me like I was going to go out with a hammer or something and try to get a deer. He was a rifle hunter. Couldn't imagine what someone would want to do that. But when I did it the first time and brought that animal back, and I mean, it was just amazing to see what happened there. And I used to shoot the pheasants that he would miss with my bow, he'd miss them with his 20 gauge. And that created an instant relationship between us. It was Goodman. So this program is about that, because integral to archery and integral to learning about archery is we need to have some kind of an emotional involvement with that. Larry talks about this when he talks about a proper protocol of shooting, so that when you have that feel when you're pulling back, and you have that feel as you transfer, what the feeling is, when it's to be, and so forth, and its relationship to finally the arrow being cast toward the target. And so I believe that Justin really sort of personifies this and his enthusiasm for it. And for me, with education, I've been an educator all my life, as to Larry and Frank as well. And if you don't have an enthusiasm about education, if education is just learning for the test, which many people do that, and they end up with a summa cum laude to hang on the dirty spot on the wall, it's a wonderful thing. But there's no real love then for education. A doctor of philosophy means a love of learning, all right? It's a lifelong kind of thing. And that's what keeps us healthy as human beings. And archery became a way of discovering that. And so this is a program to help tie that together, and the importance of that transfer of information, knowledge, and experience to others. And in the meantime, when I first started doing my research, just quickly, I thought probably only the traditional shooting was what could get us in contact with all of those things involved in the internal and external system. Now, then after I had a stroke, I had to go to a compound bow for a while, because there's a bow hanging right here on the wall behind me that I've had for many, many years, and it's a 54 pound. I could barely bend the string after that, so I had to go with a little kid's bow, and then I transitioned up to a and learned to shoot that. And then I thought, well, the only way to really develop the feeling is the traditional. No, that's not so. The only bow that does not produce the relationship that creates the good feeling that's part of healthiness and our well-being is a bow that's stuck on the end of a stick that has a trigger to it. And I don't have anything against people having to use that or wanting to use that, but that, and I've had international rifle and handgun shooters tell me once they take up the bow that there's really no feeling in pulling that trigger that's equivalent to shooting the bow.
Gosh, I couldn't agree with that more. If Larry, can you, Doc said something important where he said, like, at one point in time, only the traditional style of archery would produce that feeling. And we all know that now, that because we all shoot compound as well, and we all play the different games, your career has been built on developing competitive shooters. Can you speak to that point of like Doc realized that wasn't the case? Can you speak to that? Like, for you, for example, like, you still shoot your bow. Why do you still shoot your bow?
I shoot my bow trying to get better. Trying to get better than I was yesterday. I didn't shoot yesterday. I was so disappointed with myself. I put up new field targets because I'm going to shoot some field in July and a little bit. And I didn't get to practice yesterday. But yeah, it's the personal challenge that it gives you where you are commanding your body. And of course, that's from inside out. And the real feel comes from being part of the system, as Doc has mentioned, and understanding you're part of the system. So, if you try to dominate the bow, any bow, and try to make it shoot arrows in the middle, the bow will give you a lesson. Over and over again, it will give you a lesson because it does not react well when you try to dominate it. And Justin mentioned something I made a note about, that, compounders feel comfortable shooting at deer out to 40 yards or maybe beyond, a lot of them. And this to me is archers trying to dominate the bow. Because shooting at deer at 40 or 50 yards, you are at a decided disadvantage just from the sheer physics of the speed of sound versus the speed of your arrow. If you're shooting at deer at 50 yards, you don't understand the speed of sound and how much time that gives the deer to react. And then you're into a bad hit and a long blood trail. And that's not what I want to do. And Justin marks out that 15-yard circle for his longbow. Yeah, I'm at 25 at the most. And I'm really good at 15.
That's what
well, it's like the quote from Dirty Harry in the one movie. Man has to know his limitations.
Yeah. Well, before we go down that road,
Yeah.
I mean, I think to each their own. If you feel confident, I mean, listen, I've watched Levi Morgan kill deer at 70 yards with a compound numerous times. Not everybody's Levi Morgan, but today's bows are different. They are quieter. That's a whole other topic for another day.
Yeah.
But it's a thing though, but everybody needs to have their own perception of, like, you need to understand a realistic perception of where your efficiency is. But I want to go back to you talking about controlling the bow, because there's in the traditional bear bow world, there's a big discussion about that whole control topic. And it's something that, like, and again, I'll bring up Demer because I talk to Demer a lot, and we've always talked about, like, that idea of sort of, you need to, the idea is of letting go of the control in order to gain it. Become part of it, become part of the shot, and embrace everything about the shot. Embrace the movement of the bow afterwards. Embrace the violence of the bow pushing the arrow out of it. Put your body in a position that allows you to deal with that at its highest capacity, so that you can concentrate on the correct things. And there's like a popularity to, maybe, Larry, I don't know if you're following any of, like, the world archery stuff right now, but there's rules that are being evaluated for, like, the idea of shooting like a trigger system in bear bow, whether it's a fingernail on a tab or the fingernail in front of a grip. And they're trying to, I don't personally care which direction they go, because just like you said, if you try to control it, you're kind of going down the wrong path. But there's there's discussion on just trying to make the playing field extremely level and make it that everybody has to, the idea of bare bow is just that, it's bare, no additional, aids or anything like that. And, I think it's that idea of becoming part of the bow. It doesn't matter if it's an Olympic recurve, a bare bow, a self bow, or a compound. You need to learn to be part of the equipment. Be part. I don't know if that came out right. You're part of the shot. You aren't separate from it.
Well,
It's
yeah,
all inclusive.
you're joining the bow as an equal partner.
Yeah.
And that's evidenced in bow hand for a lot of people. So if you place your bow hand on the grip correctly, you won't be choking it. It's just placed with the thumb pad on the grip. And that allows the bow to be consistent in its action of propelling the arrow. If you choke that grip, now the bow is being interfered with and can't do a good job. So you have to know your part and how you blend with the bow.
Right. And Justin, as a longbow shooter, and I really want to get to a point where we talk about the Goodman Ranch and Doc's experience there, and maybe our future, maybe a future trip for all of us to Byron to shoot with Byron. But shooting a longbow, that's even more like, there's a joke amongst us a little bit, us bare bow shooters. I mean, we're shooting an Olympic bow, you got tiller adjustments, you got all this stuff. And I talked about playing around with some longbow, like in competitive longbow. And my friend Gracie's like, why do you want to do that? It's so much harder. It really is like it. But I mean, it's even more important when you take, like Larry, you take the notion of the way we shoot. You try to shoot X after X after X with a compound and apply that to shooting a longbow. And to get the accuracy that you want, like, it's even more crucial. That I have found the few times that I've had the opportunity to play with like a really high-end longbow. It's super, super important. Lightweight bows, you really have to be part of the system.
Yeah, for sure. So I know, one of the things that I always wanted archery to be positive, right? And so that's one of the reasons I don't get too obsessed with, I don't shoot paper targets normally. My favorite one is a tennis ball on a string in front of like an old bag target. That's really what I love to shoot at. And 3D targets, of course, deer and turkeys, shooting out of a stand, off my deck, all that stuff, right? I mean, that's what I love about archery. No rangefinder, you just look at what you want to hit and try to make it happen, right? Visualize it, try to make it happen. So yeah, for me, it never was about shooting X's. I never put an insane amount of pressure on myself. That just wasn't how I approached it. I said when I got my first bow, sort of that Samick, again, it's kind of what everybody starts out with, I think, or a lot of folks. For me, it was just like, well, I'm an archer. I can shoot my compound well enough to hunt with, right? So I always have that to fall back on because, again, that was the frame of me getting into archery. So we'll just see what happens, right? And so, again, it was always kept as a very positive, do the best you can. Are you constantly improving? Are you reading what's out there, whether it might be, Byron Ferguson's book or Howard Hill's book, right? I dragged some of those really old archery books out as well when I was kind of first learning. So for me, it was about sort of a journey and not necessarily where I have to be at a certain date. And so I think by just saying like, well, if I get good enough by this date, I'll take the bow into the woods. If I don't, well, just keep shooting it. And if I get there, great. If I have to seek out more help, that's fine too. But for me, it was just all about keeping it positive, not getting down on myself when you have a bad afternoon or a bad couple of arrows, and just keep moving forward, right? And I mean, that's also something like, if I go in the backyard and I shoot 2 bad arrows in a row, like I put the bow down and I'll walk away from it. Like I won't sit there and just keep hammering it to death, trying to fix whatever's going on, right? So I know there are a lot of guys that, shoot compounds when they first get into traditional archery. They want really good success right away, right? They have an expectation of, why can't I hit pie plates at 20 yards, right? But again, it's a process. It takes time. There's a lot to learn. And yeah, for me, it was just always keep it positive. Like Doc said, it's about feeling good. It's about enjoying what you're doing and not having necessarily an end date or a real hard goal set for yourself, because then again, you just start putting pressure on. That's what it was for me. Now, I don't shoot competitively at all. So I understand for, competitive archers, I'm sure a lot of guys maybe thrive under that pressure, or, setting goals for themselves, or how they push themselves to, obtain new levels and new. But for me, not a competitive archer. It was really about feeling good, keeping the right mindset, and staying positive.
And I really appreciate you saying that, because it's one of the things that I want to see be part of these presentations we do here is that it's not just directed towards competitive formal shooting, that it's something that people can do, and they can become part of this. And I truly believe that if you can learn archery and enjoy it, whether you're working towards a goal for a competitive event, or if you're just doing it because it's something that's good for you and you're doing it almost on a daily basis. In my program, Archery for Life, involves a proper diet for that particular individual, established by an actual blood test to tell you not only what foods you should be eating, how it should be prepared, and how often you should be eating every day. If you do that, and practice archery the way we're talking about it, either preparing for a competitive event or for just the enjoyment of doing it, and then the collateral exercises to keep your body in good shape to stand there and pull your bow. You put that together, I can tell you from a medical point of view, I'm not an MD, but I'm a PhD who teaches MDs, and I've taught hundreds of them. If you can keep yourself in that relationship to your internal and external system, you will be more healthy. Doesn't mean you're going to live a day longer than you were set out to live when the sperm hit the egg, but it means you will be healthy. And to me, Archery for Life means that it's part of it's a period of time, our life, but it's for life. And the good feeling, for the longest time, people said, well, a feeling cannot be passed transgenerationally, epigenetically, in other words. Now we can see, and it has been seen over 25 or 30 years, but now we can show it in terms of all the instrumentation we have to visualize what goes on in the brain, that when the person has a remarkable experience, the first person that ever shot an arrow and did something downrange that they couldn't do right at their hands, when the bear's coming at them, it's hard to push the bear away, But if you get some distance, then you can trouble the bear a little better. But the thing is, if you can put all these pieces together, you will be more healthy. You will live a more enjoyable and well life. With that well-being is, you flip it around, is being well. And that's one of the programs we're going to continue to present here and train other coaches to be able to pass this on to other people too. I mean, that's so very important. And so when someone has this good experience, or it can be a bad experience, let's talk about PTSD for a second. You're driving your Hummer down the road, and a roadside bomb blows up and blows your buddy's guts all over you. That's not a good experience. Many people have had that I've worked with. How can you overcome that? Well, you could overcome it the exact way we're talking here. is you can get yourself in a healthy relationship with what's going on around you and within your control by being within control within the entirety of the system. And then you can differentiate when you're walking through the grocery store and someone knocks a stack of cans over in the next aisle, that was not a roadside bomb. I am not in danger, and begin to get a hold of PTSD. And so all of these have very important components for our lifestyles these days. I'm convinced, and many other people now that are looking at the brain and see how information, not just genetics, is passed from generation to generation, can see that is probably somewhere at the root of Alzheimer's. Is that if we can learn more about how information is passed, and then we can stay in better relationship. Many people, when they get old, and I'm not getting old, I'm there, in my 82nd year, still pushing on. I have days that I'd just as soon not to go out and do things, but if you keep yourself moving, that's very, very important. It's all part of it. And archery is one of the greatest moving sports there is. There are the other sports. I just don't like chasing little white balls on green fields, So this
Golf's
is
not
why.
putting food on the plate either.
Pardon me?
Golf isn't going to put food on the plate either.
Well, it can. You can take the trophy.
Extremely difficult.
Money you win and buy all the food you want.
Good luck with all that.
My friend Arnie Palmer said to me when he tried to train me to use the driver, he said after about the third time I almost ruined his club, he said, Dick McEwen, and we were sort of colleagues in the same town, stick to archery. My motion was not this. And so motion and emotion are the same side, are the two sides of the same coin. Archery, and Larry Weiss is that book coming out yet, Larry? It's all about coaching and motion and all the different ways that we have to keep people in motion and train them.
Oh,
not yet, right?
No, not yet on that subject.
It'll be an episode all of its own. Larry's new book comes out. We're just waiting for the final.
Oh, yes. Wait.
It'll come.
But Larry has a number of books, 10 or so now altogether, I believe, and he
7.
put one together. Well, the one that you put together this time took you quite a while to put together, and interviews and contacts with great coaches, and to find out, help them find out and help others find out the importance of developing your plan and your plan for shooting. The way Justin's doing it, going out in his backyard and learning to shoot the same way every time, because you're going to need that some moment when it's 12 yards from your tree, the right buck comes in. You're going to need to be able to do that just as calm as you did shooting at the tennis balls and in front of the target. And
yeah. Doc, you were talking about PTSD and the idea of how archery can help you deal with that. And it sort of parallels the idea of competition. And I know that we strive to expose all of the sides of the archery world, everything from trad archery and shooting, for feel and for health, and shooting for competition and elite level shooting. But it's still the same concept when you're training to be a competitor. Your goal is to shoot as many perfect or as near perfect shots as possible. Absolutely. And what do you need to do in order to do that as often as you can to get better? Because ultimately you get better by shooting your best shot as often as possible. Well, on our side, in our neck of the woods, we're doing drills. We're doing, these things that are highlighting aspects of the shot to make sure that we're doing that aspect. We're breaking that shot down into incremental pieces. And this isn't something that's new. It's something that's been done for years. But in the traditional archery world, sometimes like it's been, I don't know, I call it overlooked. Rod Jenkins does a good job of sort of, and he might be worthwhile having on here. Do you know who Rod Jenkins is, Larry? Have you ever heard of Rod?
I don't. No, I can't recall.
He's an extremely experienced, traditional archery coach. Justin, do you know who Rod Jenkins is?
No, I do not.
Okay.
Sorry.
If you've watched anything through the push, I'm sure you've seen Rod.
Oh yeah.
Come
Yeah,
through.
yeah.
He's definitely one of the, I would say, like, when it comes to me as a coach and the theories and the beliefs that I have, he's probably the closest person to someone that parallels the way I coach and what I do. I did not know who Rod was before I got into, I would say I was about a year into barebow. I had no idea who he was because I was removed from traditional archery. And then I got into competitive barebow, which what got me into traditional hunting. And it just, and then you start seeing videos, and I've never seen Rod speak other than like a couple of videos here and there. But, it's that idea of let's do it to the best of our ability, find ways that we can repeat that as often as possible. And then, whether it's making us a better shooter for competition or it's making us a healthier person for the purposes of life, we're still doing that same concept. Larry, we are learning to shoot it in the middle and then doing that again.
Yes. Yeah.
And to pick up on that, an important point there is, someone will say, well, oh, you're a traditional shooter. And often what they sort of mean by that is you knock an arrow into the bow and then you just start flailing arrows downrange and hoping that something's going to meet a target, or a target, more often than not, the target will meet the arrow someplace. And that's not it. One of the great things for me going to Byron's school that he has at the Goodman Ranch in Western Tennessee is to realize, as he's teaching, he breaks that down just the same way as we learn to transfer the hold at the compound bow or with the barebow. And every shot, I mean, sometimes they can move along quickly, but every shot is done the same way and transfer the hold. And if you learn to shoot like that, then you not only get yourself in this proper relationship with the internal and external system and get the benefits of that, you're probably going to enjoy either competitive target shooting or shooting clay birds out of the air and this kind of thing, or hunting, and you will be successful at it. But the steps are there. It's just not pulling up. And I mean, you see people do that, and some people get pretty good at that. But if you watch them carefully, and they'll say, well, I don't think about any of those things. Well, their body's doing it, though, to do it the same way every time. If you don't do it the same way every time, you will get a different outcome.
Right.
And that's something I surely learned from Larry and working with him and teaching other coaches, but being taught by him in compound shooting. I never had a compound bow in my hand until I had to put one in my hand when I was briefly disabled from a stroke. I'm glad I did. I really, like Frank's saying, I enjoy shooting all of the bows. And now the barebow is going to be my final swan song here. I'm going to tackle that sucker and help it make me learn a new thing about archery.
At 82 years old. Can you, Doc, can you talk about your experience being at the Goodman Ranch? I know, like, we have talked to Byron. He's a busy guy. We want him to come on the podcast in the worst way. We just got to connect with him. Justin, you have a Ferguson bow. Doc, you've been to the Goodman Ranch. You've taught with and shot with Byron multiple times. Can you talk about what he does at the Goodman Ranch? We need to get Byron on and talk about the Goodman Ranch and what.
Well, and that's going to happen. But I think he's been traveling, and I tried to contact him the other day, and then 2 hours later, I realized they were having terrible storm through that whole area. No wonder he wasn't answering the bed unless he has it answering the phone unless he has it under the bed or in the basement. So that the Goodman Ranch is developed by a fellow named Mike Goodman, who bought a large section of land. Just it would be maybe 50 or 60 miles, some 60 miles west or east, excuse me, of Memphis. And it's just a beautiful piece of wooded land and well kept, and the trees well kept. And there's a fair-sized herd of buffalo there, a nice herd of elk. It's all under fence because he does have some exotic animals too that are there for hunting too. Some small herds, a small herd of, I think they're called red deer. I guess they have those long, thin racks and so forth. There's native whitetail there. He keeps the bears out and tries to keep the coyotes out, and they hunt turkey there and so forth. And during the seasons, you have to have the license for Tennessee, but in the off seasons, then I think it's licensed through his what do you call outfitter's license or something like that. But so you pay to hunt, you can fish there too. You stay there, absolutely wonderful meals. Byron has selected that place for his training school that takes place usually the second weekend, I believe, of June. And so that's just passed. And then again in November to teach people to shoot the longbow. And you bring your own bow, or you can shoot one of his. You learn to fletch an arrow. You learn to do make a Flemish string for your own bow, and tune it properly, and learn to shoot properly, both at paper targets and at flying targets. They're not the clay birds, but they're a bigger target. And it's a lot of good fun and a lot of great experience. And this is what I'm hoping that those who have gathered around Byron, not in a cultish kind of way, but have been trained by him, that some of us would come back again here, maybe not this fall because it's getting awful close already, but sometime next year, and have a 3 or 4 day time with Byron and with Mike. Maybe do a little hunting or sharing with each other what's worked good for for us, and make that part of one of the regular things we do through our International Archery Institute. But when I was there, the couple times I was there, there were people from other countries, and people that come from all over this United States and Canada on a regular basis. It's a great place to be.
Yeah, I would love to get down there to the Goodman Ranch with Byron. And not even just that. I mean, I would love for us to have like a I don't want to call it a rendezvous, but like a not just traditional archery, not just compound, like a group of bow hunters and archery enthusiasts that are interested into some like elite level coaching, but at the same time, like really honing the idea of being part of the bow. And you get these people together and you're teaching them different styles, different techniques, but you're still teaching them the same thing. A couple of different movements apply, but get these people together. I mean, that's just something that would be so cool for us to be able to put together. And I think there would be some major self-reflection changes on their approach to hunting and why they hunt or why they shoot a bow and how they shoot a bow. If you could get to just a day or two with people and explain, kind of that process that you've uncovered, Doc, that I don't know if it's that you have really done an amazing job of defining being part of the bow and the natural system that goes along with it.
Well, like I say, I didn't discover anything. I just uncovered what's been there for a few 100,000 years. And our bodies and neurology have changed over that period of time, and there is evolution, but at the same time, we're basically this. When we pull up and shoot and have that good feeling, we were next in line after our Uncle Archer, who shot the first arrow, because the feeling that he had was past. The theory is called the engram theory. You can look it up. Just look up engram theory, and it's how an outstanding or remarkable experience becomes embedded in the neuron, on the dendron of the nerves, and is passed forward generations after generations epigenetically. And those are an extraordinary experience, extraordinarily good or extraordinarily bad. And we can learn how to participate in that and keep ourselves healthy. And I'm sticking to it.
I think that we're more than an hour into this.
Yeah.
Which is uncharacteristic for me because I'm usually like prompt on the 45-minute mark. But the conversation was just too good. So what were you gonna say, Doc?
Thank you, Justin.
Yeah, thanks, Justin. Thanks for joining us.
Good to hear from you.
These conversations.
Yeah.
No
Again, problem.
Come shoot with us, bud.
Yeah.
Not far away. Come shoot with us.
Sounds good. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, for sure.
Glad you could join us.
And I am going to I'll tell everybody before we completely log off here, you can follow the Archery CoachCast on YouTube, and you can watch this video version. Thankfully, there's not a whole lot of editing that needs to be done in this one at all. Actually, this was a great conversation and went perfect. That will be on our YouTube channel. You can find the audio version on pretty much wherever you listen to the podcast. It's Spotify, Apple, Anchor, Podbean. I think it's on pretty much all of them for the audio version. And you can come back, please, like, if you are into all things archery, this really is probably, out of all of the podcasts that I listen to, and I do listen to a lot of them, we cover a lot of everything from advanced compound shooting to coaches and instructing, to really the health and wellness side of what archery can do for you with Doc's involvement. I mean, Doc is super passionate about this stuff, and this is the second episode that's very specific to that side, not including the interview I did with Doc talking about his transformation to barebow. And and if you guys have topics of interest, if you have guests that you're interested in, don't hesitate to reach out to us either through Facebook or just archeryuniversity@gmail.com. You can send us an email. We're readily available, and we're open to your level of interest to talk about it. It's one of those podcasts that is very all-inclusive, but it's, and maybe I'm definitely being maybe biased here, but it's definitely some pretty in-depth conversation about those topics. We cumulatively, with experience, like, we got a few years under our belts, and I'm the youngest one of this trio. But like, I mean, I've had a bow in my hand for 40 years now. So 41 years, I guess, technically. So like, we've been around the block, and we like to just share as much of the information as we can from the different directions that we go. So thank you everybody for watching. And thanks for especially joining our Facebook Live. This is the first for us, so I hope everything went well. Facebook Live has come to a close, and that's it, gentlemen.